how can I possibly talk about faith with the whole room full of the scientists?
Explicitly contrasted science as making cracks in divine creation.
It's all about hard science. You can't have any emotion.
Scientists who bridge successfully a visible religious identity with a scientific career have always been the exception rather than the majority.
Spirituality is just different. They realize that hard science and spirituality are inseparable.
You wave at the camera?
I grew
Hi,
up
Brenna.
surrounded by love and on a lake. I like to run and sing and just be in nature. And then in the summers, I would just spend days reading my books about wildlife and conservation. And luckily I had a teacher that helped build this fire in me from a young age. And then in school, we had to do a project about what we wanted to be when we grow up. And I just knew. Right around the same time, when I was 11 years old, simply put, I found God. And I decided that every day, that was going to be my challenge. Every day, I was going to try to be a better person, a more kind, fearless, generous person. And in going through this revelation, I found that I connected most with a spirituality through nature. I thought that it was a beautiful gift that I needed to protect, and I could serve the people around me by taking care of the same earth that brings us life. And, long story short, I'm now graduating with a bachelor's in wildlife ecology and life sciences communication with hopes of diving into wildlife conservation as a communicator to inspire environmental change through word and action. And I've continued to grow spiritually as well. However, I've become increasingly aware of common perceptions and conflicts within these worlds of science and spirituality.
Scientists have almost intentionally drawn a line between spirituality and science, and I think that's been utterly dysfunctional, and it left us in this highly polarized kind of world that we're now dealing with. Science is not the most heterogeneous enterprise, both in terms of ideology and in terms of religion. And in fact, the further up you go in science, so as people become members and are elected into the national academies, which is one of the highest honors that you can get as a scientist, the percentages of people who self-identify as either agnostic or atheist is much higher. So in other words, the upper echelons of science tend to be super non-religious. And that's certainly not representative of the population. Historically, surprisingly, actually, they've been much less at odds with one another than they are currently in our political climate. And often people are saying, well, the conflicts between, let's say, the Catholic Church and science goes way back to Galileo Galilei, and this is where these conflicts arise. But the Church actually never told Galilei that he wasn't right. They just told him he shouldn't talk about it. And again, that doesn't make it necessarily better, but I think there's a much more nuanced history over time. There's a long history of the two not just moving in parallel, but even moving in tandem with one another.
When religion becomes fundamental and it begins to confuse itself with science, that's where the conflict happens. As long as religion stays in its field. So if you said to me, what is the difference between the two? I would say science tries to explain how things happen, how the world was created, how viruses are transmitted, how vaccines work. Science is concerned with how. Religion is concerned with why. It's more of a meaning question. The problem is when religious people think that the book of Genesis is describing how the world was created. That's a science question. The world wasn't created in 7 days. We know that. Science has told us that. What Genesis is trying to say is, why was the world created? It's a meaning question. That it was meant to support actions of love and creativity and goodness and generosity and all those things. An interesting thing, if you read certain passages of scripture, they talk about, especially in the Psalms, the writer of Psalms talks about the awesome nature of the world. You know, you alone, O God, placed the heavens in their stature. You alone, O God, gave the moon its throne. You know, these are wonderful. But to take it literally, do we believe that God actually took a moon and stuck it up in the sky? You know, but fundamentalists do. They actually believe that, saying, well, that's not what the psalmist is saying. The psalmist is saying, I'm in awe of everything I see. And I remember, I quoted an article by Albert Einstein. He wrote to the German League of Human Rights back in 1932. Now, Einstein was basically an agnostic atheist. He would even say he was Jewish by background, but he would say he wasn't a real believer in that. But he said, but this is a great thing. He said, our situation on Earth seems strange. Everyone appears here involuntarily and uninvited for a short stay without knowing the whys and wherefore. In our daily lives, we only feel that man is here for the sake of others, for those whom we love, and many other beings whose fate is connected with our own. And then he goes on, kind of for a long period, to talk about what does that mean in terms of faith and science, because there's no evidence that we're here for any particular reason. Mm-hmm. And he said, it seems to me that the only way I can describe myself as a man of faith is to say I stand in awe before the universe. And he said, if a religious person stands in awe, then it's okay to call me religious. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. That we're all trying to arrive at that sense of being overwhelmed with our being here. Yeah. And in that sense, I think religion and science have a common ground.
If you can't see the spirituality or the spiritual part of what you do, I'm not sure you're a good scientist. You have to constantly, I think, be in awe of the work that you're doing and realizing why you're doing it.
So scientists have always taken highly moral stances and have connected and brought their values into their work. And I think that should be the case. Ultimately, I think we live in a world where scientists cannot leave their values by the door anymore. I think we're never able to. I think being explicit when you're acting as a citizen and a person of faith or a spiritual person or a non-spiritual person. I think it's very much true for atheists as well, right? Which is in many ways also a belief system. Separating that from when you're speaking as a scientist.
Can I have you lie down? Yeah. So look over at me. I'm just going to have you, I'm just going to have you, can you lie there for a moment? Yeah. Can you lie there for a moment? So there's a lot of body language involved. There's a lot of voice control and communication. And if your intent is to help them, they get that. A lot of our interns, when they come, they have an idea, about science being sort of a hard, firm, fast situation. But the more that they work with us and the more that they're here, they realize that that hard science and spirituality are inseparable. Yeah, you can't work with wildlife without being amazed and in awe every single day. And some people say, well, you get used to it. It's not a matter of getting used to it. It's there, and you're inspired every single day.
This God, however you define God, moves in and through all things. That's why we care for the planet, because the planet is part of the very being of God as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why we take care of animals, that we're part of this, that an animal lives in this very existence of God as I do. And we're part of the animal kingdom to take care of one another. Yeah. But it also puts, then if you believe that, then there's some moral injunctions that go into that too. That means that conservation is a moral question for a Christian. We have to take care of one another. We're on this planet together. Science has taught me and shown us that we live in a galaxy with probably 100 billion stars. There are probably 100 billion galaxies in the universe. And all of that stuff that we see is just a very small percentage of the actual matter in the universe. We know that. Science has showed us that. It's proven to us that. And all of that stuff tells me that if there is a God, My understanding of God is too small, and it'll always be too small. Whatever we say about God is not enough. God is bigger than all of it.
The more I work and the more I learn, the more I am in awe of everything that has come to be. And this spirituality fuels my passion for science. And I remain grateful every day that I have the opportunity to experience such raw, wild beauty.
When your deepest desire and the world's greatest need meet, that's a vocation.